ruthless millionaire abandoned his bride at the altar for his ex. You won't believe what happened next. Welcome, my dear friends, to Alcott Stories. I'm your storyteller, Alcott Bryan, and whether you're a new visitor or a long-time listener, I want you to know one thing. You're not just a viewer here. You are family. Yes, you heard that right. This channel is built with love, emotion, and the power of storytelling, and each one of you is a part of that journey. To my returning listeners, my loyal family, you've stood by me through many twists and turns, heartbreaks, triumphs, and unforgettable characters. And to those who are new, welcome home. But today, I want to speak from my heart. Our channel's reach is slowly going down, and I've realized it's because many of my sweet family members sometimes leave our stories in the beginning. I understand. Life is busy. Distractions come. But these stories, they are meant to be felt completely, from the first word to the last tear. So I ask you, my family, please stay till the end. Let the emotions carry you. Let the message reach your heart. And if a story touches you, moves you, or even challenges you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. We grow together. I trust you. I love you. And I believe in this beautiful community we've built, not just with views, but with connection. Now, take a breath. Let the world fade for just a little while. It's time to leave reality behind and step into today's journey. Are you ready? Let's begin. Selina Hart stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the lace veil that framed her glowing face. A radiant, young black woman with deep brown eyes full of dreams and dignity, she looked every bit the queen she was. The silk of her gown shimmered in the sunlight, pouring through the arched windows of the grand cathedral. Her heart fluttered, not out of fear, but anticipation. Today was the day her life would change forever. Today she would marry Grayson Vale, the man who had captured her heart, the man she believed was her future. Her mother, Margot, sat quietly behind her, tears glistening in her eyes. "You look like a dream, my baby," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. Selina turned and embraced her, the two women holding each other in a moment of pure, unspeakable love. Across town, Grayson Vale fastened the silver cufflinks on his designer shirt, his jaw tense, his movements too precise. In the reflection of the penthouse mirror, he didn't see a groom in love. He saw a man backed into a corner by duty, tradition, and the unrelenting expectations of his wealthy family. His father's voice echoed in his head. "You'll marry her, Grayson. She's smart, kind, and grounded. She's the woman you need, not the one you want." Grayson closed his eyes for a moment, swallowing hard. Camille's face flashed in his mind, her pale skin, her piercing blue eyes, her golden hair that fell like silk over her shoulders. She was beautiful by every standard, the kind of woman who turned heads at galas and lived for the spotlight. Camille Rose represented everything Grayson had always believed in: status, luxury, and the kind of beauty celebrated in magazines and on red carpets. Selina, in contrast, was humble, compassionate, and strong, a woman of depth and substance. But Grayson, raised in a world where wealth and appearance defined worth, couldn't see past his bias. Despite his parents' wisdom, warning him that beauty fades and money can disappear, he was entranced by Camille's allure. His phone buzzed, a message from Camille. "I'll be there. I need to see this." He didn't reply. Instead, he grabbed his tuxedo jacket and walked out the door. Back at the cathedral, guests began to arrive. Men in tailored suits, women in elegant dresses, the air buzzing with excitement. The Vale family was known for grandeur, and today was no different. Gold-trimmed invitations, a 10-tier cake, imported orchids, and a string quartet, all befitting the wedding of the season. But beneath the luxury was tension, silent, coiled, waiting. Selina paced the marble floor, hands clasped, eyes darting to the clock. "Is he here yet?" she asked one of her bridesmaids, her voice soft, but edged with nerves. "Almost," the girl replied. "They're seating the guests now." In the main hall, Grayson stood at the altar, looking impossibly handsome in his custom suit, his face unreadable. He scanned the crowd until he spotted her, Camille. She sat in the second row, legs crossed, lips curled into a knowing smile. She wore red, bold and unrepentant, his stomach twisted. Selina walked slowly down the aisle, every step a heartbeat. Gasps rippled through the crowd as her beauty stunned even those who'd seen her 1,000 times. She met Grayson's gaze with a warmth that could melt steel. But his eyes didn't shine the way they should have. The ceremony began. Vows were spoken. And then the moment came. The officiant turned to Grayson. "Do you, Grayson Vale, take Selina Hart to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Silence. The world seemed to pause. Grayson's jaw clenched. Camille's gaze bore into him. The silence stretched. Selina's smile faltered. "Grayson," she whispered. And then he stepped back. Just a step, but enough. He turned to the crowd, lifted the microphone from its stand. "I have something to say," he announced. Murmurs rose. Selina's heart dropped. Grayson's voice rang out, clear and cold. "I can't marry her, not because she's not worthy, but because I don't love her. I never have." Gasps, a sharp inhale from Margot. Selina's hands trembled. Grayson continued, eyes fixed on Camille. "I love someone else, someone who makes me feel alive, beautiful, desired, and I can't live a lie, not for status, not for appearances." Camille stood, walking toward him with slow, triumphant steps. Selina's world cracked, her knees buckled, the room spun. She looked at her mother. Margot had gone pale, clutching her chest. Someone screamed. Grayson took Camille's hand and faced the guests. "This is the woman I love, the one who fits my world." Murmurs turned to shouting. Chaos erupted. Selina, frozen, watched as the man she loved shattered everything, her future, her trust, her soul. The veil slipped from her head, falling to the marble floor like a ghost. Her father pushed through the crowd, rage and disbelief written across his face. "How dare you?" he roared, but his words slurred, his steps faltered. He collapsed, clutching his chest. Time stopped. Margot screamed. Selina dropped to her knees. "Dad! Dad, please!" But his eyes had already dimmed. The room faded into white noise. Grayson turned, eyes wide, Camille's hand still in his. And for the first time that day, fear flickered across his face. Selina sobbed into her father's chest, her white dress stained with tears and tragedy. The wedding that was meant to begin a life had instead ended one. And so began the unraveling of everything Selina thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the man behind the smile. As Selina's sobs echoed through the cathedral, the world around her had splintered into something surreal, suspended in the aftershock of betrayal and grief. Her dress, once a symbol of hope, now clung to her like a cruel reminder of a life stolen mid-sentence. Her father's lifeless body was gently carried out, surrounded by murmurs and sympathetic gasps, yet nothing penetrated the veil of agony clouding Selina's mind. Grayson stood dumbstruck beside Camille, whose poise never faltered, her red dress a siren's flame, eyes glinting with something far colder than sympathy. The guests, still stunned, parted in slow motion as Margot stumbled forward, clinging to her daughter, her lips quivering in disbelief. "He's gone," Selina whispered hollowly, her voice barely audible. "Mama, he's gone." Margot crumbled into her arms, and in that moment they were no longer mother and daughter, but two women gutted by the same loss, breathing in a world that had turned its back on compassion. Yet, amidst this devastation, Camille stood, a presence so out of place, so boldly intrusive, that her very existence twisted the knife deeper. No one had invited her, yet here she was, poised like royalty, basking in the destruction as if it were theatre, the smug tilt of her chin an insult to every tear falling onto the marble floor. Grayson glanced between her and Selina, a flicker of doubt washing over his face. But Camille's grip on his arm tightened, grounding him back to his choice. His face returned to stone. The press was already outside. Someone had leaked the scandal. Photographers surrounded the cathedral like vultures sensing blood. And Camille, she smiled at them, smiled. Selina watched through blurred vision as Grayson whispered something in Camille's ear, and they turned, walking away from the altar, together. It felt like the final betrayal. He didn't even look back. Selina's legs gave out beneath her. Margot and the bridesmaids rushed to catch her, guiding her into the empty dressing room where the silence screamed louder than the chaos outside. "Why?" Selina choked, staring at her reflection, smudged makeup, trembling lips, eyes drowning in devastation. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" Margot knelt beside her, holding her hands. "You gave your heart to a man who never deserved it," she said, trying to be strong even as her own soul bled. Hours passed, the cathedral emptied, but one person remained. Camille. Alone now, she stood at the altar where Selena's life had fallen apart. She ran her fingers across the roses on the arch, admiring the work. Not the destruction, but the aesthetics, the performance. Her presence was a statement, and she had made it loud enough for the world to hear. Later that night, news headlines blared with the betrayal. Millionaire groom abandons black bride at the altar for white ex-girlfriend. Comment sections exploded, debates ignited. Sympathy flooded in for Selina. Others defended Grayson, claiming a man should follow his heart. But beneath it all simmered a darker truth, a racial bias cloaked in words like beauty and chemistry. Selina stayed silent. She turned off her phone. She buried her gown in the back of a closet. She sat beside her mother in a hospital waiting room, watching Margot stare blankly at the wall. She had lost her husband. Selina had lost her father, and the man she thought loved her. The world didn't stop, but for them, time fractured. Meanwhile, Grayson and Camille retreated to a luxury resort on the coast, far from the noise. There, Camille began spinning her web tighter. She whispered dreams into his ears, new business ventures, elite social circles, a life where image and pleasure ruled. Grayson, still riding the high of rebellion, didn't see the shadows forming behind her smile. But his parents did. When news of Gerald Hart's death reached them, Grayson's mother collapsed in tears. "We pushed him to do the right thing," she wept, "and now a good man is dead, a daughter broken." His father paced, fury in every step. "He'll regret this. Mark my words." They cut off financial ties immediately, disgusted by his decision, hoping reality would slap sense back into their son. And it did. Slowly. Quietly. Camille's affection grew distant. Her phone buzzed late at night. She slipped away for hours with hollow excuses. Grayson noticed, but he said nothing. He drank more, slept less. The mansion they moved into echoed with silence. He tried calling Selina once. The call never connected. She had changed her number, cut him out, and rightly so. She had begun rebuilding, not for revenge, but survival. Law school resumed. She studied harder, poured every ounce of pain into her work. She knew that in the courtroom, emotion could be weaponized into truth. She would become the voice her father no longer had, the protector her mother now needed. Margot, inconsolable, visited Gerald's grave daily. She brought flowers, spoke to the wind, and one night, returning home, she tripped on the porch steps. Her head struck the concrete. The doctors said she was lucky to live, but she wouldn't see again. The trauma had blinded her. Selina collapsed in the hallway of the hospital when she heard. Grief, once again, slammed into her like a truck. "Why?" she screamed into the sterile air. "Why are you still taken from me?" The nurse held her hand in silence. That night, she sat by her mother's bedside, holding her fingers. "I'm still here, Mama. I'll be your eyes now. I'll take care of everything." And she did. She worked nights at a legal firm, studying in between, cooking, cleaning, guiding her mother through darkness. The girl who had once worn lace and pearls now wore determination like armor. Camille, meanwhile, spiraled. She started an affair with Grayson's best friend, Ethan. At first, it was just flirtation, then secret dinners, then nights in hotel rooms, while Grayson drank himself into forgetfulness. When Ethan suggested they forge documents to transfer Grayson's assets, Camille didn't hesitate. She was born for manipulation. It was art to her. The plan worked. In weeks, Grayson's bank accounts drained, his properties signed away. One evening, returning from a failed investor meeting, Grayson called for Camille. No answer. He climbed the stairs, calling her name. In their bedroom lay a red envelope. Inside, a letter. "Goodbye, loser. You have nothing now. Not your wealth. Not your name. Not your friend. Not even your pride. Don't come looking for me. I've already disappeared." He dropped the letter. His hands shook. His knees buckled. He stared at the ceiling as the truth clawed through him. Camille had never loved him. She loved the game, the prize, and now she had it all. Or so she thought. The scandal erupted again, this time with him as the fool. Headlines called him everything from naive to pathetic. But Selina read it all from a distance. Her heart didn't leap with vengeance. It ached with something deeper. This man, who had taken so much, was now a shadow of himself. And still, somewhere in her, the law student, the daughter of justice, the child of kindness, stirred. She would not let Camille win. She would not let evil triumph. She opened her laptop, began drafting a legal complaint. Forgery, fraud, embezzlement. She gathered evidence, quietly, precisely. The day the court summons arrived at Camille's doorstep, her smirk finally cracked. And as Grayson sat in a courtroom, humbled and hollow, he saw her, Selina, standing tall, eyes fierce, heart resolute. The girl he had left at the altar was now the woman who held justice in her hands. And this time, she would not be silenced. The moment Grayson's voice reverberated through the microphone, every word that followed felt like a dagger lodged deep within Selina's chest. Her heart, already fragile from the weight of the wedding day, seemed to stop entirely as the words echoed through the church. "I can't do this. I never loved her." Grayson's voice rang out, cold and indifferent, as though he were talking about a simple inconvenience rather than the woman he was supposed to marry. His gaze never met hers. The words were a strike, sharp and unrelenting. "I won't marry someone I don't find beautiful," he declared, his eyes now on Camille, whose beauty seemed to glow as if it were a perfect match to the cruelty of the moment. Selina's breath caught in her throat, her body frozen in disbelief as Grayson, the man she had trusted with everything, the man she had imagined spending her life with, casually took Camille's hand and pulled her close. A small smile played on Camille's lips, confident, triumphant, as though this was exactly the moment she had been waiting for. Grayson didn't even hesitate as he spoke the words that would haunt Selina for the rest of her life. "She's the woman I truly love." A collective gasp echoed through the church, the sound sharp like a single breath sucked in from every shocked soul in the room. Whispers flooded through the guests, their eyes darting between Selina's devastated face and the couple standing before her, as though it were all some sick joke, a performance no one had agreed to. But for Selina, there was no illusion, no comfort in the disbelief. There was only the unbearable weight of reality crashing down on her. She had been nothing more than a prop, a choice made by her parents, a tool to fulfill some misguided expectation of wealth and status. Grayson's words weren't just a rejection, they were a declaration of everything that had never truly mattered in the first place: beauty, wealth, and the superficial. Tears streamed down Selina's face, unbidden and unstoppable, as her knees buckled beneath her. She stumbled backward, unable to hold herself upright, unable to comprehend what was happening in the world around her. She felt herself slipping, her vision blurring, the cold stone of the church floor rising up to meet her. It was as though the ground had swallowed her, a vast, hollow void in the place where her heart had once been. She had loved him, truly, deeply. She had believed in him with everything she had. And now, all that was left was the shattering echo of his words. She was nothing more than a discarded object, a part of a plan he had never chosen to begin with. She wasn't beautiful enough for him, not enough to warrant his love. Her father, standing at the back of the room, his face stricken with confusion, terror, and an immense sense of helplessness, watched as the girl he had raised with love and care crumbled before his eyes. His heart, already fragile from the years of pressure and struggle, could not withstand the pain of seeing his daughter in such agony. The shock hit him like a freight train. He gasped for air as his hands trembled, his knees buckled, and without another sound, he collapsed. The room went silent, except for the sound of Selina's raw, unrestrained sobs. It was as if time itself had frozen in that moment. The gasp of the audience, the crash of her father's body falling, the deafening silence that followed. It was an unbearable weight, an injustice that shook the very foundations of the life she had built with so much hope. The guests rushed toward Selina's father, trying to revive him. But the scene before them, Grayson and Camille standing there, their bodies entwined, basking in the twisted culmination of their cruel love affair, made the situation feel even more absurd. Grayson had completely discarded the life Selina had imagined, discarding not just the wedding vows, but everything that had been promised, not just to her, but to the life they had built together. He didn't even look at her, not once. He was already lost to Camille, lost in the suffocating grasp of a woman who had always been nothing more than an illusion to him. Someone who was more than willing to bring him down to the level of his vanity and pride. It was all so calculated, so cold. Camille, standing by Grayson's side, looked like a queen claiming her throne, while Selina was nothing more than the discarded pawn in their game. The sound of her father's death knell reverberated in Selina's mind, the weight of the loss nearly crushing her. How could this be happening? Her world, so carefully constructed, now seemed like a hollow memory, a fleeting dream that had come to an end far too quickly. Her father, gone. The man who had always been her anchor, her protector, her rock. He was gone because of this betrayal. The man who had stood by her side through every hardship, every struggle, every moment of her life was taken away from her in the worst possible way. Selina's heart broke again, this time for him, for the man who had never been able to bear the humiliation that his daughter had to endure. The church was filled with chaos as the paramedics arrived, but Selina was beyond their reach. She was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Camille and Grayson, oblivious to the devastation they had caused, stood at the altar, lost in the rapture of their twisted love affair. It was as though they couldn't even fathom the enormity of what they had done. There was no remorse, no regret in Grayson's eyes. And Camille? She wore that sickening, smug smile, the one that said she had won, that this was all part of her plan. Selina's mother, Margot, was inconsolable, clutching her husband's lifeless body as though she couldn't comprehend what was happening around her. But even in her grief, she held her daughter close, trying to shield her from the world. "We'll get through this, Selina," she whispered. But Selina couldn't hear her. It was as though her mother's voice was a distant echo in a world that no longer made sense. The air was thick with confusion, disbelief, and a crushing sorrow. As the church slowly emptied, leaving only the hollow silence of a love lost and a life destroyed, Selina felt herself slipping further away from reality. She could hear the hushed whispers of the guests, some of them offering condolences, some expressing disbelief. They spoke in fragments, their words almost meaningless in the context of the unbearable heartbreak that Selina felt. The press, lurking outside, already had their cameras trained on the unfolding tragedy. News of the betrayal was already spreading like wildfire, the headlines already painting Grayson as the villain, the heartless millionaire who had abandoned his black bride for the beautiful white woman he had once loved. But none of it mattered to Selina. She had no interest in the opinions of the outside world. The only thing that mattered was the overwhelming emptiness inside of her, the wound that could never be healed. The man she had loved, the man she had dreamed of building a future with, was gone, and in his place stood a stranger, someone she could no longer recognize. She looked at her reflection in the stained glass window, her face pale and tear-streaked, her body trembling with the weight of everything that had been stolen from her in that one fateful moment. "Why?" she whispered, her voice cracking under the strain of her grief. "Why did he do this to me?" There was no answer, only the silence of a world that had turned its back on her. And in that silence, Selina's world shattered. The night after the devastating events at the church was one that seemed to stretch endlessly for Selina. The house was eerily quiet as she sat in the dim light of her bedroom, her body trembling uncontrollably, her heart weighed down by the unbearable emptiness that now defined her life. The wedding had been a nightmare, a cruel mockery of everything she had hoped for. And now, her father, her protector, her guiding light, was gone. The shock of his sudden collapse, his heart unable to bear the crushing weight of the betrayal, left Selina feeling hollow, as if her soul had been torn from her body. The hours blurred into one another, and though the night passed, it brought no comfort, no rest. Selina found herself pacing, unable to settle, her mind spinning with fragments of thoughts and emotions that couldn't seem to settle into anything resembling clarity. Grief was not something she had ever prepared for. Not in this form, not in this suffocating, overwhelming way. She had always imagined loss to be a quiet thing, something that came in small increments over time, something that one could learn to live with. But this was something else entirely. Her mother, Margot Hart, was just as shattered. When Selina went to check on her that night, she found her mother sitting in the dark, her eyes vacant, as if the life had been drained out of her. The realization that she would never see her father again, never hear his voice, never feel the warmth of his embrace, was a reality that seemed almost too much for her mother to bear. Margot was, in every sense, broken. She had loved her husband deeply, and losing him wasn't something she could simply get over. She couldn't function. She couldn't move on. In the days that followed, Margot refused to leave the graveyard. She would sit there for hours, her body curled in mourning as she whispered to her husband through the tears that never seemed to stop flowing. She spoke to him as if he could hear her, as if he could somehow return to her side and ease the agony that gnawed at her from within. Each day, Selina would go to the cemetery to bring her mother back. But each time, Margot would refuse to leave, clinging desperately to the gravestone, her hands pressed against the cold stone, as though she could will him back into the world of the living. "Why did you leave me?" Margot would cry, her voice hoarse and trembling. "I can't do this without you. I can't live without you." Selina could do nothing but watch her mother's despair, feeling a knot in her chest grow tighter and tighter with each passing day. It was as if the woman who had raised her, the strong, beautiful, loving mother, had disappeared, replaced by a shadow of herself, a hollow shell who no longer cared for the world that remained. But worse than the sadness, worse than the overwhelming grief that seeped through every crevice of their lives, was the slow, creeping darkness that began to take hold of Margot's mind. Every day, the grief pushed her further into herself, her eyes becoming more and more distant as she mumbled to herself. She spoke of death as though it were a companion, her thoughts consumed by the belief that she would never feel whole again. Selina had never seen her mother so fragile, so broken, and it terrified her. She tried to comfort her, tried to offer solace, but nothing worked. Nothing could fill the hole in Margot's heart. Then one day, after several weeks of constant grieving, Selina found her mother sitting quietly in the living room, her hands shaking as she reached out to touch the photo of her husband on the mantel. The tears had stopped flowing, but the emptiness in Margot's gaze spoke volumes. It was as if the grief had settled deep inside her, as though it had taken root in her very soul and refused to let go. "I can't see him anymore," Margot whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't see anything anymore." It took a moment for the realization to sink in. Margot wasn't speaking figuratively. Her mother's eyes, once so full of life, were now clouded, the light fading from them as she turned toward her, daughter with a vacant expression. The doctors confirmed what Selina had feared. Margot's overwhelming grief had stolen her vision, a result of the stress and the emotional toll of the past few weeks. It was as though her sorrow had consumed her entirely, taking everything from her in the process. She could no longer see the world around her, the colors, the faces, the beauty of life. Selina was devastated, but in a way, she knew that this was the final blow. Her mother's blindness had come not as a sudden accident, but as the result of something much more insidious, the slow, insidious decay of the soul through constant sorrow. It was almost too much for Selina to bear. Not only had she lost her father, but now she was losing her mother, too. Both of the people who had given her life, who had made her feel safe in this cruel world, were slipping through her fingers like sand. And now, Selina found herself with the weight of 2 lives to carry. It wasn't just the loss of her father that was overwhelming. It was the crushing responsibility of taking care of her mother, of trying to hold everything together when the pieces had already shattered. She couldn't do this alone. She felt herself breaking under the weight of it all. There were days when she didn't know how she could go on. There were moments when she felt like she was suffocating, like the world around her had become a suffocating, oppressive force. But somehow, through the darkness, Selina kept moving. She had no choice. Her mother needed her. She had to be strong for Margot, for herself, for the life that had been taken from them. There were moments when she would sit beside her mother and simply hold her hand, trying to reassure her that everything would be okay. But how could she say those words when she knew deep down that everything had already fallen apart? How could she tell her mother that things would get better when she had no idea how to make it through the next day? The days stretched on in a blur of emotions, a haze of grief and exhaustion. Selina found herself walking the fine line between holding on to hope and succumbing to despair. There was no room for weakness, no space to grieve herself. Her mother needed her, and Selina knew that she couldn't afford to let herself fall apart, even when every part of her wanted to. And yet, despite everything, a spark remained within her, a tiny ember of defiance, a fierce will to survive. She couldn't let go of that. She couldn't let the darkness swallow her completely. So, with each passing day, Selina took a deep breath, stood a little taller, and faced the world with a heart that had been broken, but not completely destroyed. She would carry on, for herself, for her mother, for the memory of her father. In the quiet moments when the world seemed to pause for just a second, Selina would sit alone, her hands pressed against her father's grave, feeling the cool earth beneath her fingers. She would whisper to him, telling him how much she missed him, how unfair it was that he was gone. And though there were no answers, no comfort, no miracles, Selina found that somehow, in those moments of solitude, she could find the strength to keep going. It wasn't much, but it was enough. In the days following her father's death and her mother's blindness, Selina Hart was forced to take a step into a life she had never imagined for herself. The weight of her family's tragedy sat heavy on her shoulders, and the world felt as though it had gone dark and hollow. Yet it was in the deepest shadows of her grief that she began to change, her pain becoming the fire that ignited her determination. Every tear she had shed, every sleepless night spent pacing, and every moment of helplessness that had overwhelmed her heart slowly morphed into an unshakable resolve. There was no room for weakness anymore. She couldn't afford to succumb to the darkness that had taken her father, and now threatened to rob her of everything else. Her mother needed her. She needed her own strength, not only to survive, but to build something out of the ashes that had once been her life. Selina dove headfirst into her studies. The law was no longer just an academic pursuit. It was her salvation, her means of ensuring that the suffering she had experienced would not be in vain. There was no time to mourn or retreat into despair. She had to be the one to hold everything together, and she would do it through sheer willpower. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was grueling. She could feel the weight of her circumstances pressing down on her, but with each passing day she became more focused. Every lecture, every case study, every legal brief was our step toward something greater, a purpose that was far bigger than herself. The cold halls of the law school, the late nights spent reading volumes of law books, and the ever-present feeling of exhaustion became a part of her new reality. But even as the challenges mounted, something shifted inside her. She felt a fire kindling deep within her, a fire born of loss, but one that would fuel her success. Her mother's blindness only deepened Selina's sense of responsibility. She became not only her mother's caretaker, but also her protector, guiding her through the painful darkness of both their lives. The tenderness with which she assisted her mother was juxtaposed with the growing hardness in her heart. Selina could no longer afford to show weakness. In a world that had taken so much from her, she had no time to be soft or vulnerable. But it wasn't bitterness that consumed her. It was purpose. She hardened, yes, but never in a way that made her cold. She refused to let the world's cruelty take away her capacity for kindness. Her mother needed her, and the world needed someone like her. Someone who had suffered, who understood the pain of losing everything, and who had risen from the ashes of that suffering to become stronger, more resilient. Months turned into years. Selina's name became known in the legal community, not for her beauty or her wealth, but for her unwavering dedication and her fierce advocacy for the voiceless. She became known as a lawyer who wasn't afraid to take on the hardest cases, those that others would have backed away from. She fought tirelessly for people who had nowhere else to turn, for the powerless, the broken, and the marginalized. And in every case, in every victory and every loss, she found a piece of herself. The woman who had once dreamed of a different life, a life full of love and happiness, was now someone else entirely. She was a warrior for justice, a beacon of hope for those who had none. Her heart, though scarred by her past, remained tender, compassionate for others, yet impenetrable when it came to her own vulnerability. Despite her success, the weight of her personal life never fully lifted. Caring for her mother remained a constant challenge, but it also gave Selina a deep sense of purpose that kept her grounded. There were moments of despair, nights when the loneliness seemed unbearable, when the silence of her mother's blindness felt like an insurmountable wall between them. But even in those moments, Selina refused to crumble. She would sit beside her mother, take her hand, and whisper soothing words that she knew would never be heard, but that she said anyway. It was her way of letting her mother know she was there, that she would never leave her side, no matter how hard life became. Then came the day when Selina took on a case that would change everything for her. It was a case that on the surface seemed like just another routine legal battle. A powerful corporation had taken advantage of a small community, and the people were desperate for justice. But there was more at play than what appeared on the surface. As Selina dug deeper into the case, she began to uncover a web of corruption and deceit that stretched far beyond what she had imagined. The case became personal. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated, and suddenly everything she had worked for, every hour of sleepless nights, every sacrifice, was on the line. This case was more than just a victory or a defeat. It was about proving to the world that she wasn't just a woman who had survived tragedy, but a woman who could bring justice to those who had no other means of fighting back. As the case progressed, Selina's own demons began to resurface. The pain of her father's death, the bitterness of Grayson Vale's betrayal, and the crushing weight of her mother's blindness all seemed to converge, threatening to overwhelm her once again. But this time, something was different. This time, she fought back. She refused to let her past dictate her future. She was no longer the broken girl who had watched her life crumble around her. She was a force to be reckoned with. And as she stood in that courtroom, facing off against the very people who had caused so much harm, she felt the fire inside her burn brighter than ever before. This was her moment of reckoning. This was the culmination of all the pain, all the suffering, and all the strength she had cultivated over the years. With each victory, Selina grew more confident. She wasn't just fighting for her clients, she was fighting for herself, for the woman she had become. She was fighting to prove that no matter what life had taken from her, no matter how many times she had been knocked down, she could rise again. The woman who had once been defeated by her circumstances was now a force of nature, unstoppable, unshakable, and fierce in her resolve. As the final verdict came down in her favor, the courtroom erupted in applause. Selina's heart raced, her hands trembling with the weight of the victory. But it wasn't just the legal triumph that mattered. It was the realization that she had done it, that she had transformed her pain into purpose, and that she had not only built a life from the ashes of her past, but had set fire to the world around her with her strength and resilience. For the first time in years, Selina felt like she was truly alive again. And as she left the courtroom, the weight of everything she had endured still heavy on her shoulders, Selina allowed herself a moment to breathe. She had become the woman she was meant to be, not defined by her past, but shaped by it. She had risen from the ashes, and she was ready to set the world on fire. Grayson Vale's life had been restructured into a luxurious prison, one that glittered on the outside, but imprisoned him in a world of emptiness. After his dramatic breakup with Selina and the chaos of the wedding day, he thought that marrying Camille Rose would be his redemption, his second chance to prove to himself that beauty and wealth were enough. Together, they had embarked on a honeymoon that was more about appearances than affection. Yacht parties, champagne by the glass, endless vacations to places that only the ultra-wealthy could afford. Grayson had become a part of this gilded cage, wearing the finest suits and attending the most exclusive events, his face always polished with the same practiced smile. To the outside world, he was living a dream that many envied. But for Grayson, it was hollow. His thoughts often drifted back to Selina, though he would never admit it, not even to himself. What he had once thought was unshakable certainty, that wealth and status could bring him happiness, was now starting to feel like a chain around his neck. Still, he told himself that he had chosen this life. After all, Camille was beautiful, sophisticated, and glamorous in every way. She fit perfectly into the world he had always desired. But as time went on, something began to gnaw at him, a realization that he had never truly loved her, nor she him. She had wanted him for his wealth, just as he had wanted her for her beauty and status. Their marriage was a facade, a gilded arrangement, and deep down, both of them knew it. Camille, ever the socialite, had no interest in a true partnership with Grayson. She was more focused on the lifestyle that came with being his wife, the social circles, the parties, the endless opportunities for shopping sprees and lavish dinners. Camille was the epitome of surface-level beauty, and it showed in the way she approached everything in life. She smiled for the cameras, posed for the society pages, and looked the part of the perfect wife. But beneath the glossy exterior, there was a growing emptiness inside her as well. She didn't want love. She wanted luxury, and she had married Grayson for all the wrong reasons. Over time, Camille's attention began to wane. She grew tired of Grayson's increasing disconnection. She could see it in his eyes, his boredom, his detachment from their world. He no longer thrilled her the way he once had. Grayson's charm had faded to her, replaced by a sense of dissatisfaction she couldn't quite place. It didn't help that Derek Blackwell, Grayson's best friend, had begun to spend more time around the couple. Derek was the type of man who could make anyone feel at ease. He had an easygoing charm, a wit that never missed its mark, and an intensity that kept people on their toes. Where Grayson's looks had drawn Camille in, Derek's energy was magnetic, a force that made her feel alive in a way Grayson could no longer. At first, Camille tried to dismiss it. She told herself that Derek was just another one of Grayson's friends, that she wasn't truly interested in him. But as time passed, she found herself increasingly captivated by his presence. Derek's casual smiles, his flirtatious remarks, his deep, confident voice, everything about him made Camille feel a spark she hadn't felt in years. And when Grayson was busy with business deals or making appearances, Camille found herself lingering near Derek. The chemistry between them was undeniable, though neither of them spoke about it directly. Their glances became more frequent, their conversations more intimate, and before long, Camille found herself craving Derek's attention more than she craved anything else in her life. Derek, for his part, noticed the change. He had always respected Grayson, but there was something about Camille that intrigued him. Her beauty, her elegance, and her sharp intelligence made her an undeniable presence in any room. But now, something was different. She seemed restless, as if she were searching for something beyond the walls of her gilded cage. Derek had always been able to read people, and he could see the cracks forming in Camille's perfect world. He wasn't blind to the fact that she was no longer looking at Grayson the way she used to, and that small flicker of attention she now gave him hadn't gone unnoticed. Camille was playing a dangerous game, but she didn't care. The allure of a new excitement was far too tempting to ignore. There was a spark in Derek's eyes that she hadn't seen in Grayson's for a long time, and that spark became an obsession. Their conversations became more frequent, and their flirtations, subtle at first, began to grow bolder. What started as a harmless exchange of glances escalated into private rendezvous. Grayson, oblivious to the growing tension between his wife and his best friend, continued to spiral deeper into his own discontent. He spent his nights alone, drowning his sorrows in expensive whiskey and expensive distractions. It was as if the life he had built for himself had become a shell, and every time he tried to touch the core of his existence, he only found emptiness. What he hadn't realized, what he had refused to see, was that the life he had chosen was breaking down, not only between him and Selena, but also between him and Camille. What had been a marriage of convenience for both of them had become a ticking time bomb, and both Camille and Derek were growing impatient for the explosion. It was in the late-night hours, after another lavish party had ended and the mansion had fallen silent, that Camille made her move. Derek was in town for a weekend getaway, and Grayson was out of town on business. The perfect opportunity. As she slipped into Derek's arms that evening, her heart raced with both excitement and guilt. She knew this would change everything. But the truth was, she didn't care. What Camille truly wanted was more than just Grayson's wealth. She wanted the thrill of the chase, the excitement of something forbidden, the validation of her beauty that no amount of champagne or yacht parties could provide. She wanted Derek, and that night she took him. The night that Camille gave herself to Derek was the first step down a dark and dangerous path. Her heart raced with an intoxicating mixture of guilt and exhilaration as she wrapped herself in the forbidden embrace of Grayson's best friend. What had started as innocent flirtation had spiraled into something far more dangerous, something that consumed her in a way she had never imagined. Derek, with his sharp wit and devil-may-care attitude, made her feel alive again in a way Grayson never had. He was everything that Grayson wasn't, reckless, unpredictable, and utterly unafraid of the chaos they were about to unleash. As their affair deepened, so too did their shared ambition. Derek, though seemingly carefree and charming on the surface, harbored a darker desire beneath his smile. He didn't love Camille. He saw her as a means to an end, a step toward his ultimate goal, Grayson's fortune. It wasn't just her body he craved, it was the wealth, the power that came with marrying Grayson, and through Camille he could finally take it all. And Camille, for all her beauty and elegance, had become weary of the life she was leading. Grayson's wealth and the luxury it provided were no longer enough to satiate her. They felt more like chains than the golden dream she had once envisioned. The opulent dinners, the yachts, the endless parties, they all faded into the background of her mind as she realized that nothing truly mattered. Grayson had never seen her for the woman she truly was, only for the shallow beauty she projected. She longed for freedom, for something real, something that could fill the void inside her. And Derek, with his hungry eyes and smooth words, was the key to her escape. Their affair was a twisted kind of love, a seduction that was as poisonous as it was passionate. Every stolen kiss, every clandestine meeting in the shadows of Grayson's home was a thread that tightened around their fates. They were trapped in a dangerous game, one where their desires fueled each other's ambitions. But neither of them saw the danger of what they were doing, at least not at first. As their love affair grew darker, so did their plan. They both understood that Camille's role in Grayson's life had become irrelevant. She had no more use for the hollow marriage she had entered into. What she needed now was power, and Derek had the perfect idea for how to get it. The first step was to destroy Grayson, to break him down in the most painful way possible, and to do it without leaving a trace of their involvement. They started small, working together to manipulate Grayson's financial records, forging documents and altering accounts so that Camille could eventually seize control of everything. They were playing a long game, each move carefully calculated to maintain the illusion of loyalty and devotion. Grayson, blissfully unaware, continued to live his life of extravagance, never suspecting that the woman he had married and his closest friend were conspiring to bring him to his knees. Camille's feelings for Grayson had long since faded into bitterness and resentment. She had married him for his wealth, but over time she had grown to despise him for his arrogance, for his blindness to her needs. She had tried at first to convince herself that he would change, that he would see her as more than just a pretty face, but he never did. Instead, he sank deeper into his world of wealth and status, his emotions as cold and unyielding as the marble floors of their mansion. In Derek, she saw something different. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also passionate in a way Grayson had never been. He stirred something inside her, something that Grayson had never managed to ignite. And so, together, they wove their web of deceit. The deeper they went, the more dangerous the game became. Their stolen moments of pleasure were now intertwined with dark scheming, each touch of passion a step closer to the unraveling of Grayson's entire empire. Derek's desire for wealth grew with every passing day. He was obsessed with the idea of taking everything Grayson had worked for, and Camille was the perfect accomplice to help him make it happen. The more they discussed their plans, the more they fantasized about the life they would lead once they had it all. Camille would no longer be the perfect wife, trapped in a gilded cage. She would be free. Free to live the life she wanted. Free from the constraints of her past. But as their affair deepened and their plans advanced, there was something shifting beneath the surface. Camille could feel it. She was no longer just playing a game. She was slowly losing herself in the process. She had once prided herself on her beauty, her intelligence, her ability to get whatever she wanted. But now, with Derek, she found herself questioning everything. What had she become? Was this really freedom, or was it just another form of captivity? And Derek, though charming and calculating, was becoming something darker in her eyes as well. What had started as an escape had now become a prison in its own right. Derek's lust for power was all-consuming, and Camille could see it in the way he spoke, in the way he looked at her, like she was the key to his success, not the woman he loved. But still, she pushed these doubts aside, convincing herself that they were just growing pains, that they were merely part of the dangerous path they had chosen. It was too late to turn back now. They were already in too deep. And as Grayson continued to live his life oblivious to their betrayal, Camille and Derek plotted their next move. The walls of their world were closing in around them, and all that was left was the waiting game. Would they get away with it? Or would their sins come to light in a way none of them could foresee? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same. Again, Grayson stepped into the cold, empty mansion after his long business trip, the quietness of the house swallowing him whole. He had expected the usual warmth, Camille's smile, the gentle clinking of glasses, the luxury of home after the chaos of meetings and corporate discussions. But instead, the silence gripped him, unsettling and ominous. His heart began to race as he walked through the front door, the weight of something he couldn't yet name pressing down on his chest. He called out for Camille, his voice echoing through the vast, empty halls. No response. Confused and unnerved, he made his way to their bedroom, hoping to find her there, lounging with a glass of wine, or lost in some idle chatter. But as he entered the room, his eyes were immediately drawn to a letter placed neatly on the bed. An unfamiliar sight. A chill ran down his spine as he approached it, the paper stiff and cold to the touch. He unfolded it with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the words written in Camille's familiar handwriting. The message hit him like a punch to the gut, the cruel reality seeping into his bloodstream with each sentence. Goodbye, loser. You have nothing now. Your wife, your wealth, your best friend. They're all mine. Grayson's world shifted beneath him. The words blurred on the page as his heart thudded violently in his chest. For a moment, he couldn't process what he was reading. His mind screamed for answers as the implications of the message set in. Camille. Derek. The betrayal. The chaos. His eyes went back to the letter, the brutal finality of her words sinking in. She had taken everything from him. His wife, the woman he'd believed he loved, gone. His best friend, the person he had trusted more than anyone, gone. And the empire his parents had built with their blood, sweat, and tears, the wealth, the power, the very foundation of his life. It was all gone. Grayson felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving him breathless and disoriented. His legs threatened to give out as the weight of the situation crushed him. The thought of Camille and Derek's affair had lingered in the back of his mind. But he had pushed it away, not wanting to believe that his closest friend and the woman he'd married were capable of such deceit. But now, standing in the empty room, with nothing but a cold, mocking letter to greet him, the truth could no longer be denied. He felt a rush of anger, followed by a wave of nausea, as he stumbled toward his desk. He opened the drawer, his hands trembling as he searched for something, anything, that could make sense of this. There, nestled among the papers, he found the forged documents. His fingers shook as he scanned through them, seeing the names of his accounts, his properties, his investments, all signed with Camille's and Derek's forged signatures. The fraud was elaborate, precise and ruthless. His fortune was being drained right in front of him, and he had no control over it. His mind screamed in disbelief. This couldn't be real. But the reality of it hit him like a ton of bricks, his stomach sinking further as the truth clawed its way to the surface. His wealth, the empire he had inherited, was slipping through his fingers, piece by piece. Grayson had always prided himself on his business acumen, his ability to navigate the world of finance with skill and precision. Yet here he was, utterly helpless. His trust had been betrayed in the most intimate way possible. His wife, his best friend, had turned against him, and in doing so, they had gutted the very life he had known. He thought about his parents, the sacrifices they had made, the way they had instilled in him the value of hard work and integrity. They had warned him, long ago, that beauty and wealth were fleeting, but kindness and humanity would always endure. Grayson had ignored their warnings, choosing instead to immerse himself in the shallow waters of luxury and status. Now, standing amidst the ruin of his life, He realized how right they had been. But it was too late. His parents were gone, their legacy reduced to ashes, and he, too, had lost everything. Grayson sank into a chair, his head in his hands. The tears came slowly at first, a tight knot in his throat, a stifled sob. But as the enormity of what had happened began to settle in, the floodgates opened, and he wept openly, his body trembling with the force of his grief. He was a man broken by his own choices, undone by his trust in the wrong people. The mansion that had once felt like a symbol of his success now felt like a prison. His wealth, the jewels, the cars, the yachts, all of it seemed meaningless now. What had it all been for? What had he built, really? A life based on illusions, on shallow desires, on things that could be taken away in an instant. Grayson's thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone. He wiped his face, trying to regain some semblance of control before answering. But when he saw the name flashing on the screen, his lawyer, he knew there was no more denial. The legal battle had already begun. Camille and Derek had taken everything from him, and now they were going to make sure he had nothing left. The thought of Camille, of how he had once loved her and trusted her, left a bitter taste in his mouth. She had always been beautiful, yes, but it wasn't just her beauty that had entranced him. It was the idea of her, the perfect partner in his perfect life. But now he saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who had used him to climb the ladder of wealth and status. Grayson had been blinded by her, by his own obsession with beauty and wealth, just as his parents had warned him. Now, standing alone in the ruins of his life, he realized that everything he had valued, the very things he thought would protect him, had led him to this moment of devastation. The empire his parents had built, the family legacy, was gone. The man he had once been was gone, and all he had left was the cold reality of his failure. As the days passed, Selina's life began to settle into a rhythm, though it felt like the ground beneath her was always shifting. She had become a woman forged in the furnace of pain, transforming her heartbreak into resilience. But when she woke up that morning, her gaze was immediately drawn to her phone, and her pulse quickened as the notifications poured in. Social media was ablaze with the latest scandal. News outlets had picked up the story. Grayson Vale, the once dashing millionaire, was now at the center of a colossal public downfall. His marriage to Camille, the betrayal of his best friend, Derek Blackwell, and the shocking theft of his fortune, all of it was being aired for the world to see. Selina's heart didn't race with satisfaction as it might have once. She didn't revel in the fact that the man who had torn her life apart was now lying in ruins, his wealth and his reputation in shambles. Instead, there was a quiet storm brewing inside her, a storm of something far more powerful than anger, something far more enduring. It was justice. She had spent years watching from the sidelines, her heart in pieces, but the pieces had begun to fit together, not into a broken mosaic, but into something more defined, more focused. Her thoughts turned back to that fateful day, Grayson's cruel words, the humiliation, the loss. He had ripped apart everything she had known, and in return his empire had crumbled. But it wasn't the destruction she sought. It was the accountability. She couldn't undo what had happened to her father, the weight of that pain still heavy in her chest. But she could fight for what was right. She could make them pay, not for revenge, but for the people they had harmed, for the lives they had destroyed. And that's when it clicked. She would make them face justice, not in the way Grayson had thought of her, but in a way that only a woman with her strength could. Selena sat up straighter in her office chair, her fingers brushing the files stacked neatly in front of her. Her eyes scanned them. Legal papers, case notes, the fragile foundation of the case she had just begun to build. Camille, Derek. Their names stood out like glaring beacons. Their betrayal, their schemes. It wasn't just about the wealth they'd stolen from Grayson. It was about something much more sinister. It was about their disregard for human decency, their manipulation, their ruthless drive to break and destroy. They thought they had won, that they had gotten away with it. But Selena wasn't the kind of woman who would let that happen. She was no longer the timid, devastated woman from before. She had learned to rise, to move forward, to fight. And this time, it wasn't for survival. It was for victory. Her hand gripped the file with a sense of finality. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. As a seasoned attorney, Selena knew the ins and outs of the legal world better than most, but she knew that this case wouldn't be won in court alone. This was about strategy, precision, and the weight of truth. As much as she wanted to focus on the facts, the forged documents, the stolen assets, Selena also knew that Camille and Derek's betrayal had deeper implications. They had wrecked lives, destroyed families, crushed dreams. She would make sure they paid for that. But first, she needed to ensure that the public understood what had happened. She was going to use everything she had, her intelligence, her resilience, her unshakable moral compass, to bring them to justice. The road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, but Selena had come to understand something very crucial over the years. Nothing worth having was ever easy to achieve. If she had learned anything from her father, it was the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity, of holding true to one's principles, no matter the cost. Grayson Vale may have been the one who had shattered her, but now he was the one who needed to witness her strength. She would show him that despite his betrayals, despite the way he had left her to pick up the pieces of her life, she was a force to be reckoned with. She would show him that beauty and wealth, though fleeting, could never eclipse the power of justice. As she prepared to take her first steps in the legal battle against Camille and Derek, her mind flashed to her mother, Margot Hart, the woman who had endured unimaginable pain, yet had never once broken. The loss of her father, the darkness that had consumed her mother's life, had left Selena alone in a way that no one could truly understand. But now, as she looked at the files in front of her, she knew that she wasn't truly alone. She had something far more powerful than loneliness or pain. She had purpose. The ringing of her phone pulled her from her thoughts. It was her colleague, the one who had been working with her on her most recent cases. "Selena, we've got some interesting news. The media's been buzzing about Grayson's situation. It seems like Camille and Derek have underestimated you. Are you ready to take the next step?" Selena's heart skipped a beat, but her resolve remained unwavering. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady, her mind clear. "I'm ready." As she hung up the phone, the weight of the battle ahead settled on her shoulders, but she didn't feel afraid. She felt empowered. She knew this was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. As the world watched Grayson Vale unravel, Selena Hart was about to make her mark in a way she had never imagined. But this time, it wasn't for revenge. It was for justice. The days felt like weeks as Selina meticulously worked on the case against Camille and Derek. Every hour spent in the office, poring over documents and building her strategy, every sleepless night spent in contemplation, was a step closer to bringing them to justice. It wasn't just about proving that they had stolen from Grayson. It was about proving that their betrayal, their cruel manipulation, had consequences. Selina knew that Camille and Derek were calculating individuals, but what they hadn't counted on was her unwavering resolve. They hadn't anticipated her fight for something bigger than herself. The weight of the case felt heavier with every passing day, but Selina was no longer the woman who had once been broken by the people she loved. She had been forged in that crucible of pain, and now she was stronger, sharper. The people she had trusted, the man she had given her heart to, had betrayed her. They had taken everything, her dreams, her father, even her mother's sight. But they had not taken her spirit. And they would not. Her determination grew, not just for herself, but for the countless people who, like her, had been mistreated, overlooked, and betrayed by those who believed that wealth and status could shield them from the consequences of their actions. With every legal document she filed, every motion she argued, Selina was sending a clear message. No one was above the law. No one. As her case against Camille and Derek gained momentum, she began to see cracks in their carefully constructed facade. The public was beginning to turn against them. Grayson's downfall had made them both the subjects of ridicule, but their actions had now made them vulnerable. People were starting to question their motives, their true intentions, and the truth of their carefully crafted lives. Selina's phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a journalist from one of the major news outlets. "Miss Hart, we've been following the case against Camille Rose and Derek Blackwell. We understand that you're representing Grayson Vale's interests. We'd like to know how you feel about the growing public sentiment that Camille and Derek have been hiding behind Grayson's wealth. Would you be willing to share your perspective?" Selina hesitated for only a moment. Her words were measured, deliberate. "What happened between me and Grayson is personal, but the case we're building now is about justice. What Camille and Derek did wasn't just a betrayal of trust, it was an abuse of power. They've stolen from Grayson, but they've also tried to destroy him, and they need to be held accountable for that." The journalist thanked her, and as the call ended, Selina felt a surge of purpose. The world was watching. The weight of her decision to speak up, to bring justice, had reached far beyond the walls of the courtroom. It was now a public fight, and she was more determined than ever to see it through. But as the case continued to evolve, Selina found herself facing an unexpected emotional storm. Grayson, despite all that had happened, had reached out to her. It was not in the way she expected. There were no grand apologies, no desperate pleas for forgiveness. His message was simple, to the point. He was seeking a meeting. Selina had no desire to engage with him. She had spent too long nursing the wounds he had inflicted, too much time rebuilding herself. But there was something in his message, a raw vulnerability, that tugged at her. Grayson Vale, the man who had once seemed invincible, was now a man who was broken. She couldn't ignore the curiosity, the twisted pull that urged her to face him. But that didn't mean she would lower her guard. She hadn't come this far just to go back to the past. She would meet him, but only on her terms. She couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the man she had once thought she knew. How had he fallen so far? How had his empire crumbled so completely? But more importantly, what had he learned from his mistakes? The day of their meeting arrived. The tension in the air was palpable as Selina walked into the coffee shop where they had agreed to meet. Grayson was already sitting at a table, his once perfectly composed appearance now worn, almost unrecognizable. He looked tired, drained even. His eyes, which had once held a cold confidence, were now filled with regret. He stood when she entered, his movements slow, hesitant. Selina remained standing. She hadn't come here to make him feel better. She had come to find out the truth. "Selina, I'm sorry for everything," Grayson began, his voice thick with emotion. She could see the effort it took for him to speak, to even meet her gaze. "I don't know where to begin, but I wanted to say that I never intended to hurt you. I was selfish. I let my parents dictate my life. I thought that wealth and beauty were all that mattered. But I was wrong. I've lost everything because of the choices I made." Selina didn't respond right away. The words he was saying, the ones she had once dreamed of hearing, held little weight now. The damage had already been done. "You're right," she finally said, her voice steady. "You lost everything because you didn't understand what truly mattered, and you took me down with you. My father is gone. My mother is blind. And you—" She paused, gathering her thoughts, forcing herself to say what needed to be said. "You destroyed me. You destroyed us." Grayson's face twisted in pain, as if her words were a physical blow. He opened his mouth to speak, but Selina stopped him. "Number, don't say anything else. You can't undo what you've done. And neither can I." Grayson swallowed hard, his throat working as he tried to speak again. "Please. I know I can never fix what happened, but I want to try. I know I was wrong, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But if there's any chance—" "There isn't," Selina cut him off, her voice like steel. "You had your chance. You had everything, and you threw it away. I don't need your apology. What I need is justice. And I'm going to make sure Camille and Derek face the consequences for what they've done. And if you want to make things right, if you want to try to fix anything, then stay out of the way." Grayson's face crumpled, the weight of his mistakes finally sinking in. He nodded, his shoulders sagging. He had nothing left to offer her. Nothing at all. Selina stood, her heart steady but resolute. "Goodbye, Grayson," she said, the finality in her voice unmistakable. And with that, she turned and walked away, her mind clear, her heart stronger than ever. Grayson was part of her past now, one she would never revisit. She had a battle to win, and nothing, not even him, would stop her from seeing it through. Selina left the coffee shop with a mixture of finality and a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She knew that part of her past, the part that had been tethered to Grayson Vale, was truly behind her now. She no longer carried the weight of what could have been, or the pain of what had been taken from her. Her heart had hardened, not in bitterness, but in strength, and she could feel herself becoming more resolute with every step she took. She wasn't just fighting for justice for Grayson anymore. She was fighting for herself, for everything she had lost, and everything she had gained. As the weeks passed, Selina poured herself into her work with an intensity that both astounded and terrified her. The case against Camille and Derek grew stronger every day. She spent countless hours sifting through the intricate layers of deceit they had woven, uncovering forged signatures, manipulated financial records, and damning correspondence. It was more than just a case now. It was a mission to reclaim her dignity, her father's legacy, and her mother's future. There was no room for distraction, no room for doubt. She had made a promise to herself that no matter how long it took, she would see it through. At home, things weren't much easier. Her mother, Margot, was growing more dependent on her with each passing day. The weight of her mother's blindness, the constant need for care, added a layer of responsibility to Selina's already heavy shoulders. But she didn't mind. In some ways, it was her way of holding on to her father, by keeping her mother close, by ensuring that she had everything she needed. Selina had learned the hard way that life could be taken in an instant, that everything you knew and loved could vanish without warning. Her father's sudden death had stripped away the illusion of permanence. But caring for her mother, taking care of the person who had been her rock, gave her a sense of purpose in a world that sometimes felt so uncertain. But it wasn't all somber. Selina had learned how to laugh again, how to smile even on the days when everything felt impossible. Her mother had become a constant source of light, even in the dark, as they found new ways to adapt to the challenges they faced. They spent evenings together, with Selina reading aloud to her mother, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. There were days when Selina allowed herself to forget the pain, to be present in the moment and not in the shadows of her past. Then came the news. The first hearing for the case against Camille and Derek was approaching. It felt like the entire world was watching as Selina stood before the court, preparing to deliver her opening statements. The pressure was immense, and yet Selina found herself centered in a way she hadn't expected. She wasn't fighting for revenge. She wasn't fighting to punish Grayson's betrayers for the sake of it. No, this was a fight for justice, a fight to right the wrongs that had been done not just to her, but to countless others who had been swept under the rug of the wealthy and powerful. She was fighting for the voiceless. The day of the hearing arrived, and with it, the cold, sterile atmosphere of the courtroom. Selina stood tall, her nerves hidden beneath an exterior of calm professionalism. Camille and Derek sat at the other side, their expressions still one of arrogance, even as the weight of their actions hung over them like a dark cloud. They believed they had won, that they had outsmarted Grayson, that they had escaped the consequences of their greed. But Selina knew better. The truth was a force stronger than any manipulation or deceit, and she would make sure that it came to light. Selina began her opening statement, her voice steady and clear, her words measured and powerful. She spoke not just of Camille and Derek's crimes, but of the broader implications of their actions, how they represented a system of corruption that favored the rich and privileged over the ordinary people who worked hard every day to survive. She spoke of the betrayal of trust, the violation of vows, and the consequences of playing with people's lives for personal gain. Her words were like arrows, each one aimed, with precision at Camille and Derek's carefully constructed facade. As the hearing progressed, Selina's case grew stronger, and the cracks in Camille and Derek's story became impossible to ignore. Witnesses came forward, testimony was given, and the evidence Selina had painstakingly uncovered was presented. With every passing moment, it became more and more clear that Camille and Derek had thought they were above the law, that their wealth and connections would shield them from the consequences of their actions. But they were wrong. The courtroom was buzzing with tension, and Selina felt the weight of every eye on her as she delivered her closing arguments. She could hear the quiver in her own voice, but she didn't falter. "I stand here today," Selina said, "not just for Grayson Vale, but for every person who has been trampled on by those who think that wealth and beauty make them untouchable. I stand here for my father, who lost his life because of the actions of these people. I stand here for my mother, who is blind because of the emotional toll that their betrayal took on us. I stand here for myself, for the woman I am becoming, the woman who refuses to be broken by the lies of those who have everything and still want more. This is not just about money. This is about dignity. This is about justice." The room was silent as her words hung in the air, the gravity of the moment sinking in. Selina stood tall, unwavering, knowing that this was just the beginning. Whatever the outcome of the case, she had already won something far greater: her strength, her courage, her voice. And as she walked out of the courtroom, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The battle was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. As Selina stepped out of the courtroom, the cold air wrapped around her like a breath of finality, the city buzzing around her, unaware of the storm that had just passed inside those walls. Reporters swarmed, flashes blinked, microphones extended like spears, but she walked through them silently, her head held high, her heart still beating with the echoes of her closing statement. The world now saw her not as the abandoned bride, not as the broken daughter, but as the warrior who faced down the impossible and stood tall. Inside, Grayson had remained seated long after the session ended, numb from the power of her words and the weight of his guilt. Camille and Derek, now surrounded by federal officers, had their smugness stripped by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut, their future replaced with cold bars and long years of reckoning. The verdict had not even been officially announced, but the evidence, the emotion, the truth, everything had collided into a verdict that no jury could deny. Selina hadn't just won a case, she had rewritten the entire narrative of her life. That night, she stood in the hospital beside her mother, Margot, whose blind eyes searched the air, sensing her daughter's victory by the quiet confidence in her voice. Selina squeezed her mother's hand and whispered, "It's done, Mum. They're gone. Justice is ours." And for the first time in months, Margot smiled. Not just a weak lift of lips, but a full, soul-deep smile that reached into the corners of her pain and lit them up. Selina knew what needed to come next. She had used her strength to fight, and now it was time to use her strength to heal. Grayson showed up 2 days later, not with arrogance, not with apologies rehearsed like scripts, but with hollow eyes and a trembling voice, standing like a child outside Selina's law firm office, his once impeccable suit wrinkled and loose, his posture wilted. He asked to see her. Her secretary, startled by the appearance of the man once known as a Titan, called Selina immediately. She stood behind her desk, frozen for a heartbeat, then whispered, "Let him in." He walked in slowly, hesitantly, the same man who had once stood on an altar and burned her world with a microphone. He didn't speak right away, and she didn't offer comfort. The silence between them was thick, not with hate, but with grief. And when he finally spoke, his voice cracked like dry earth. "I don't deserve to stand here. But I'm here anyway." Selina said nothing. He lowered himself to his knees. "I lost everything," he continued. "My wealth, my company, my friends, Camille, Derek. They were poison, and I drank every drop. But the worst thing I lost wasn't money. It was what I threw away on that wedding day. I saw you in that dress, Selena, and I still walked away. Not because of you, but because of me. My ignorance, my pride, my blindness." Still, she said nothing. "Your father died because of me. Your mother lost her sight because of me. You walked through hell because of me. And yet you still stood in that courtroom and fought for me, even when I never earned it." His voice broke and tears streamed freely down his face. "I don't expect forgiveness. But if there's anything left I can do to honor the people I've hurt, please, tell me." For a long time, Selina stared at him. She could feel her father's absence in the room like a silent observer. She could feel her mother's resilience running through her veins. And slowly, with eyes softening, but voice steady, she replied, "You want forgiveness? Bring my father back. Give my mother her sight. Undo the pain of every sleepless night, every scream I swallowed, every tear she cried on his grave. If you can do that, Grayson, I'll give you forgiveness." He wept harder, rocking on his knees. "I can't." "Then don't ask me for what you can't earn," she said. "But if you want to make it right, there is something you can do." He looked up, desperate. "Anything." "Go to my father's grave," she whispered, her voice low and hard, "and kneel like you are now. Apologize to the man whose heart stopped because yours was blind. Then go to my mother, take her hands, and ask her to forgive you. And if she finds it in her broken soul to say yes, only then will I even consider the idea of healing what's between us." Without hesitation, Grayson left. That night, in the pouring rain, he went to the cemetery. Alone. Unseen. No cameras, no entourage, just a man and a stone, with a name carved deep into it. He collapsed beside the grave, sobbing into the earth, whispering apologies that came too late, clinging to a memory he never knew he would miss. In the morning, he went to Margot. She sat in her chair by the window, her eyes blank, her hands folded in her lap. He knelt again, gently taking her frail fingers in his and pressing his forehead to them. "I took your husband," he whispered. "I shattered your daughter. But if you can forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be worthy of your mercy." Margot didn't speak for a long while. Then her voice, broken but clear, floated through the air like the last song of a mourning dove. "You're not worthy of my forgiveness. But my daughter, she deserves peace. And peace can't exist in hate." And then she said it, the words that cracked something inside Grayson's soul forever. "I forgive you, not for you, but for her." Grayson wept at her feet. That same week, Selina received a call from the top ophthalmology institute. Grayson had funded the entire treatment plan for Margot's surgery. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't announce it to the world. He just did it. And when Selina took her mother to the hospital and the surgery was complete, the first thing Margot saw in years was her daughter's face, shining with tears of joy. Margot whispered, "You look just like your father." Selina cried, laughed, and hugged her mother tighter than she ever had. In that moment, something shifted inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding, healing, hope. That night, Selina stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker. She thought about Grayson, the boy who broke her, and the man who was trying to fix what he shattered. Could redemption be real? Could love rise from ruin? She didn't know yet, but she knew this. The story wasn't over, and maybe, just maybe, it could still have a different ending. Weeks passed. The seasons began to shift, the autumn wind sweeping amber leaves across the city like a quiet rebirth. Selina Hart stood taller now, not just as an acclaimed attorney or a woman who'd survived unbearable loss, but as someone who had reshaped the contours of her own destiny. Her mother, Margot, walked beside her again, seeing the world anew with eyes gifted by science and miracles, and the two of them shared long walks, whispered stories, and moments of reflection in the places where silence once lived. Grayson Vale, no longer the man who wore arrogance like armor, worked silently in the background, not asking, not pressing, just building, donating to charities, supporting women-led law firms, and funding scholarships for young black girls pursuing law, all in Selina's name, but without her knowledge. He had learned that love is not loud, not flamboyant, but patient, humble, enduring. One afternoon, as the sky turned lavender and the sun spilled golden streaks across the courthouse steps, Selina found herself face to face with Grayson once again. Not in a courtroom, not in bitterness, but on the same stone steps where she once sat alone with shattered dreams. He approached slowly, dressed in simple clothes, the gleam of his old wealth replaced by something far richer. Depth. "I didn't come to win you back," he said softly, eyes unwavering. "I came to honor you. I came to say that even if the rest of my life is lived without you, I will still spend it making the world better because of what you showed me." Selina searched his face, no longer seeing the boy who hurt her, but the man who rose from his own ruin. And she smiled, a small, genuine smile. "You did a terrible thing, Grayson, but you became better because of it. That matters." He nodded, tears brimming. "It does, but it doesn't fix everything." "No?" She said, "It doesn't, but it plants something new." And that new thing grew. Weeks later, Selina organized a gala for justice reform. The room sparkled, not with diamonds or prestige, but with purpose. Survivors, reformers, scholars, community leaders all stood together in unity. She took the stage, voice calm, steady, fierce. "We were taught to measure people by wealth, by appearance, by power. But I'm here because my father taught me a different measure: kindness, integrity, truth. That night I was abandoned. I thought my life ended, but in truth, it began. I rose, and I'm still rising." The room erupted in applause, and in the back, Grayson clapped too, quietly, with reverence. After the event, he waited outside. Selina stepped into the evening air, her gown flowing like ink across moonlight. They stood face to face again. "There's something I want you to see," he said, guiding her to a nearby garden. There, nestled in the soil, was a stone bench surrounded by new trees. On the plaque it read, "In honor of James Hart, whose heart lives on in every act of justice." Tears welled in Selina's eyes. "You did this. He gave you the strength that saved me. This was the least I could do." She touched the stone gently. Her father's name, not just remembered, but rooted into the world. "You really changed," she whispered. He nodded. "Because of you." Then came the moment neither expected. Not a kiss, not a dramatic confession, just hands reaching for each other, and holding, for the first time, without pain between them, without shadows, just quiet understanding. A future unknown, but a present healed. The story ends not in fireworks, but in sunrise. Selina and Grayson walking down a garden path beside Margot, who wore sunglasses, not out of blindness, but from the bright sun in her eyes. Laughter echoed, love returned, legacy lived, and a message was written in every heartbeat of this new beginning. True beauty fades, wealth disappears, but character, love, and justice, they endure forever.